Shahryar, rejoicing at the tidings of his approach, went forth to meet him, saluted him, and welcomed him with the utmost delight. He then ordered that the city should be decorated on the occasion, and sat down to entertain his brother with cheerful conversation. But the mind of King Shah Zaman was distracted by reflections upon the conduct of his wife. Excessive grief took possession of him, and his countenance became sallow and his frame emaciated. His brother observed his altered condition, and imagining that it was occasioned by his absence from his dominions, abstained from troubling him or asking respecting the cause, until after the lapse of some days, when at length he said to him, "O my brother, I perceive that thy body is emaciated and thy countenance is become sallow." He answered, "O brother, I have an internal sore," and he informed him not of the conduct of his wife which he had witnessed. Shahryar then said, "I wish that thou wouldest go out with me on a hunting excursion. Perhaps thy mind might so be diverted." But he declined, and Shahryar went alone to the chase. Now there were some windows in the king's palace commanding a view of his garden, and while his brother was looking out from one of these, a door of the palace was opened, and there came forth from it 20 females and 20 male black slaves. And the king's wife, who was distinguished by extraordinary beauty and elegance, accompanied them to a fountain, where they all disrobed themselves and sat down together. The king's wife then called out, "O Masood!" and immediately a black slave came to her and embraced her, she doing the like. So also did the other slaves and the women, and all of them continued reveling together until the close of the day. When Shah Zaman beheld this spectacle, he said within himself, "By Allah, my affliction is lighter than this." His vexation and grief were alleviated, and he no longer abstained from sufficient food and drink. When his brother returned from his excursion, and they had saluted each other, and King Shahryar observed his brother Shah Zaman, that his color had returned, that his face had recovered the flush of health, and that he ate with appetite after his late abstinence, he was surprised, and said, "O my brother, when I saw thee last, thy countenance was sallow, and now thy color hath returned to thee. Acquaint me with thy state." "As to the change of my natural complexion," answered Shah Zaman, "I will inform thee of its cause, but excuse my explaining to thee the return of my color." "First," said Shahryar, "relate to me the cause of the change of thy proper complexion, and of thy weakness. Let me hear it." "Know then, O my brother," he answered, "that when thou sentest thy Wazir to me to invite me to thy presence, I prepared myself for the journey, and when I had gone forth from the city, I remembered that I had left behind me the jewel that I have given thee. I therefore returned to my palace for it, and there I found my wife sleeping in my bed, and attended by a black male slave, and I killed them both, and came to thee. But my mind was occupied by reflections upon this affair, and this was the cause of the change of my complexion and of my weakness. Now, as to the return of my color, excuse my informing thee of its cause." But when his brother heard these words, he said, "I conjure thee by Allah that thou acquaint me with the cause of the return of thy color." So he repeated to him all that he had seen. "Then," said Shah Zaman, "give out that thou art going again to the chase, and conceal thyself here with me, and thou shalt witness this conduct, and obtain ocular proof of it." Shahryar, upon this, immediately announced that it was his intention to make another excursion. The troops went out of the city with the tents, and the king followed them, and after he had reposed a while in the camp, he said to his servants, "Let no one come in to me." And he disguised himself, and returned to his brother in the palace, and sat in one of the windows overlooking the garden. And when he had been there a short time, the women and their mistress entered the garden with the black slaves, and did as his brother had described, continuing so until the hour of the afternoon prayer. When King Shahryar beheld this occurrence, reason fled from his head, and he said to his brother Shah Zaman, "Arise and let us travel whither we please and renounce the regal state, until we see whether such a calamity as this have befallen any other person like unto us, and if not, our death will be preferable to our life." His brother agreed to his proposal, And they went out from a private door of the palace and journeyed continually, days and nights, until they arrived at a tree in the midst of a meadow, by a spring of water, on the shore of the sea. They drank of this spring and sat down to rest, and when the day had a little advanced, the sea became troubled before them, and there arose from it a black pillar, ascending towards the sky and approaching the meadow. Struck with fear at the sight, they climbed up into the tree, which was lofty, and thence they gazed to see what this might be. And behold, it was a Jinni of gigantic stature, broad-fronted and bulky, bearing on his head a chest. He landed and came to the tree into which the two kings had climbed, and having seated himself beneath it, opened the chest, and took out of it another box, which he also opened. And there came forth from it a young woman, fair and beautiful, like the shining sun.